David Cole had built a life on silence, not the silence of peace but the silence of distance. His cabin sat deep in the Colorado woods, miles away from the nearest town. It wasn't much, a one-room shelter of rough-cut logs, with a small porch that looked out onto endless pines. The roof leaked when snow piled heavy. The wood stove groaned when the wind cut across the valley. But to David, it was enough to disappear, enough to be left alone. He was only 38, but he carried himself like someone much older. His face was sharp, his eyes always alert, his voice rough from years of shouting over gunfire. David was once a Marine, not the kind that left quietly and settled into a desk job. He had lived the missions people never read about, and he had survived the one that still haunted him. That mission was the reason he was here, in exile. The images returned without warning, his team moving through a village, the sound of a radio call that came too late, the explosion that ripped through the street, the screams that followed, the sudden silence when his brothers were gone. David lived. They didn't. He carried that weight into the forest, where no one could see it. The only one who could see through him was Bruno. Bruno was a German shepherd, strong, disciplined, but with a softness in his eyes that broke through the hardest days. He had been trained as a working dog, and he still moved with the alertness of a soldier. But in this cabin, he wasn't just a protector, he was family. Every morning, David opened the door and Bruno bolted into the trees, nose to the ground, tail cutting through the air. The two of them would hike the ridges, collect firewood, sometimes track elk just to remind themselves they still could. At night, Bruno rested by the fire while David wrote notes he never sent to families of men who would never read them. Bruno was more than company. He was a reminder that loyalty once given never fades. And yet, for all the quiet he had built, David could never outrun the noise inside his head. The nightmares came sharp, the smell of smoke, the sound of a gun chamber clicking. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he woke with his hands clenched so tight his nails dug into his skin. Bruno would press against him, steady and warm, pulling him back to the present. Most days passed, the same, chopping wood, fixing the roof, training Bruno to follow commands he already knew by heart. It was a rhythm, a routine, but routine can't keep the world away forever. The forest had a way of carrying sound. A snapped branch could echo for yards, a crow's call could bounce between ridges. David knew every noise, every shift in the wind. That evening, the woods were too still. The sun dropped behind the mountains, pulling long shadows through the trees. David sat on the porch, cleaning the rifle he rarely used anymore. Bruno lay by his feet, ears twitching, nose in the air. Then, in an instant, the dog was on his feet. A low growl rolled from his chest. His eyes locked on the tree line. David froze. He trusted Bruno's instincts more than his own. Something or someone was out there. He set the rifle aside and grabbed the flashlight. Bruno led the way, muscles tense, his growl turning sharper. David's boots crunched on the pine needles as he followed, every sense alive. The forest was dark now, the kind of dark that swallows you whole, and that's when he saw it. Not an animal, not a hunter. It was a girl. She was tied to a tree, ropes digging into her arms, duct tape pressed across her mouth. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to scream, but only muffled sounds came out. David's heart kicked into overdrive. He scanned the trees around them, no movement, no sound before rushing forward. He cut the ropes, ripped the tape away. The girl gasped for air. Her voice cracked, but the words tumbled out. "They're coming back. Please help me." David didn't know who they were, but he knew this: whatever nightmare he had tried to leave behind had just found its way to his doorstep. The forest at night wasn't usually this loud. David had lived here long enough to know the difference between the natural sounds of the woods and something that didn't belong. Bruno knew it too. The German shepherd's ears perked up, his body stiffening. A low growl rumbled in his chest, one that David hadn't heard in a while, the kind it meant real danger. David grabbed the flashlight hanging by the cabin door and switched it off as soon as he turned it on. The beam was too sharp, too obvious. Instead, he trusted the moonlight slipping through the branches. "Easy, boy," he whispered, crouching low. Bruno didn't ease. His gaze was fixed on the dark path cutting through the pines. Then it came. Again, faint. A sound carried by the wind. Not an animal. Not a branch snapping under a deer's hooves. It was softer, strained, human. A muffled cry. David froze. He hadn't heard a sound like that since Afghanistan. Prisoners gagged and tied. His stomach tightened. He thought he'd buried those memories with the rest of his past. Bruno moved first, pulling at the leash, but David didn't stop him. They slipped through the trees, careful, slow. Every step David took was calculated. years of training falling back into place. The forest was his friend, and tonight it hit him. The sound grew clearer. Someone was struggling. Rope against bark, breath against cloth. David tightened his grip on the flashlight, though he never turned it on. Then he saw her. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, bound to a tree with thick rope. Her mouth was gagged with a strip of cloth, her eyes wide and wild in the dim light. She jerked against the bindings, but it was useless. Bruno growled low, and the woman froze, terrified. David raised a hand to calm them both. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." He knelt down, pulled a knife from his belt, and in a few quick motions, cut the gag loose. The woman gasped, sucking in sharp breaths. "Please," her voice cracked. "You have to help me. They'll come back." David scanned the trees, instincts firing. They took me. I don't know why. Please, just untie me. Please." Her panic was real. David's pulse quickened. Whoever they were, they couldn't be far. He cut the ropes quickly, and the woman collapsed forward into his arms. "Easy." He steadied her, setting her on her feet. "What's your name?" "Anna," she whispered. Her eyes darted around the dark forest, like she expected monsters to appear at any moment. "We have to move. They'll find us." Bruno's ears twitched. His growl deepened again, warning them. David didn't like this. He'd spent years keeping to himself, away from the chaos of other people's lives. But now, chaos had walked straight into his world and tied itself to a tree just half a mile from his cabin. He kept his voice calm. "Anna, listen to me. Who are they?" She shook her head. Trembling. "Men, armed. They dragged me out of my car, said something about my father. I don't." Her voice broke. "I don't understand." David's jaw tightened. "Father, men with guns." This wasn't random. Before he could ask more, Bruno barked sharply, once, not playful, not casual. It was his signal. They weren't alone anymore. Voices drifted through the trees, faint, but getting closer. Flashlights cutting through the dark, weaving between branches. "Shit," David muttered. His instincts screamed at him. Fight or disappear. He turned to Anna. "Stay close. To me. Don't make a sound." Her eyes widened in terror, but she nodded. Bruno moved at his side, low and alert. David led them off the path, weaving through the underbrush, his mind already mapping escape routes. But he knew the truth. He could run all night, and it wouldn't matter. Whoever these men were, they'd keep coming. And David's quiet life, his self-made prison of solitude, had just been shattered. As they slipped deeper into the forest, Hannah's breathing ragged and Bruno's growl never fading, David understood something he hadn't felt in years. The war had followed him home, and this time, it wasn't just his life on the line. The forest wasn't quiet anymore. Voices echoed between the trees, flashlights cutting jagged lines through the dark. David kept Anna pressed low behind a fallen log. Bruno crouched at his side like a coiled spring. "Stay down. Don't move until I say," David whispered. Anna's hands trembled against the bark. Her breathing was loud enough to give them away, and she tried covering her mouth to muffle. Bruno's ears flicked. His growl rumbled deep in his chest. The voices grew closer. 4, maybe 5 men. They moved in a line, sweeping the area like professionals. This wasn't a drunk group of punks out for trouble. These men knew what they were doing. One of them stopped, his flashlight grazing the log where David and Anna hid. David froze. Years of training told him to stay still, even though every muscle in his body screamed to move. "Spread out," one of the men ordered. His voice was low, steady, confident. She couldn't have gotten far. David recognized something in the tone of authority. A leader. Then, a beam of light landed on them. "Got you." David grabbed Anna's wrist and yanked her up. "Run." Bruno leaped forward at the same time, barking loud, sharp, the kind of bark that made men flinch. Shots rang out. Bark splintered from the log. Anna screamed, but David dragged her into the dark, weaving between trees, low and fast. Bruno kept pace, darting ahead, then circling back, making himself a target. More gunfire cracked through the forest. David shoved Anna to the ground behind a cluster of rocks. "Stay here." He pivoted, knife in hand, as a shadow lunged through the trees. The man swung a rifle butt at David, but he sapped, slamming his shoulder into the attacker's chest. They crashed into the dirt. The man cursed, scrambling, but Bruno was already there. His teeth sank into the man's arm. A scream cut through the night. "Bruno, off." David barked, and the dog released instantly, teeth dripping. The man bolted back into the trees, yelling in pain. But then another voice came, strong, clear, almost calm. Well, the ghost himself." David turned slowly. A tall man stepped into the moonlight, flanked by 2 others. He was dressed in dark tactical gear, not sloppy like the others. His face was lean, sharp angles, eyes cold as stone. Lucas David didn't know the name yet, but he knew the type. Leader, redditor, and not afraid. You're better than I expected, Lucas said, almost smiling. But this isn't about you. His eyes shifted to Anna, who crouched behind the rocks, terrified. Hello, Anna, Lucas said smoothly. Your father sent his regards. Anna's face went pale. What do you want with me? Lucas tilted his head. Your father took everything from me. My company, my future, my family. He crushed me, and he walked away smiling. So now, I take something from him, something he can't buy back. Anna shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't know what you're talking about. My father, your father, Lucas snapped, his voice suddenly sharp. Destroyed lives, and you're the message he'll never ignore. David stepped forward, placing himself between Anna and Lucas. She's not going anywhere with you, Lucas smirked. And you're going to stop me? One broken soldier in his mud. Bruno's growl deepened, low and dangerous. For a second, the two men locked eyes. David saw it clearly now. Lucas wasn't some random criminal. He was trained, disciplined, and full of a hatred that burned hot. Lucas gave a small nod to his men. Take them. The forest erupted in chaos again. Two men lunged forward. Bruno hit the first one like a bullet, teeth clamping down on his leg, dragging him screaming to the ground. David swung his knife in a tight arc, knocking the second man's weapon aside and driving a fist into his throat. The man crumpled. Anna, move, David shouted. He grabbed her arm and sprinted. Gunfire exploded behind them. Branches cracked, dirt sprayed. Bruno stayed tight at David's side. Even as bullets whipped past them, they didn't stop running until the shouts faded behind them, the forest swallowing the noise. David finally pulled Anna down beside a stream, both of them gasping for air. Anna's eyes were wide, shining with tears. Who was that man? David shook his head, his chest heaving. Someone with a grudge, someone who's not letting go. Anna's voice trembled. He's going to kill me. David looked at her, then at Bruno. Standing guard, ears sharp, chest rising and falling, with deep, steady breaths. No, David said firmly. Not while I'm here. For a moment, Anna's fear met his determination. It wasn't much comfort, but it was enough to keep her from falling apart. The truth, though, pressed heavy on David's chest. This wasn't random, this was personal, and if Lucas had already found them once, he'd find them again. The wall wasn't just back, it had a name, and his name was Lucas. The stream ran cold against David's boots as he led Anna across the water. Bruno splashed beside them, ears pricked, listening for every sound. They didn't stop until they reached the other side, where the ground rose into a ridge of rocks and tangled brush. David crouched low, steadying Anna as she tried to catch her breath. Her chest heaved, her hair clung to her damp face. Are we safe? She whispered. David shook his head. Not even close. Bruno growled low, confirming it. Somewhere behind them, voices echoed faintly. Lucas's men weren't giving up. David scanned the ridge. He knew these woods better than most, but Lucas's crew had something he couldn't ignore. Gear. They'd been moving too fast, too coordinated. He suspected they had more than guns. He was right. A faint red beam swept across the trees not far away. A laser scope, then another, crisscrossing the branches like silent predators. David swore under his breath. Thermals, he muttered. They're scanning for body heat. Anna's eyes widened. What do we do? David's brain clicked into old patterns. This was combat, survival. He looked at the stream. The cold water could mask their heat signatures for a while. He grabbed Anna's arm. We move in the water. Stay low. Keep quiet. Bruno, heel. They slipped back into the current, crouching so only their heads were above the surface. The icy water bit into their skin, but it worked. The red beams passed over them, gliding on the far bank without stopping. Anna shivered, teeth chattering, but she followed every step David made. Bruno stayed tight at David's side, his fur-slick eyes locked forward. They followed the stream for nearly half a mile before David led them out beneath an overhang of rock. They're hidden by thick ferns. He finally let Anna collapse onto the ground. Her body shook uncontrollably from the cold. David pulled his jacket off and draped it around her shoulders. You'll warm up, he said quietly. Anna looked up at him, her voice small. How do you know all this? The way you move, the way you hide us. David hesitated. His past was a locked box, and he wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. I've been here before, he said simply. Before Anna could respond, a sudden buzz cut through the silence, high-pitched, mechanical. David's eyes shot up. A drone hovered above the treetops, its red light blinking as it scanned the ground. Damn it, David muttered. He grabbed Anna's hand again. We move. Now, the drone's camera panned their way. Bruno barked once, shop, then they were running again, weaving through the undergrowth. Gunfire cracked in the distance as Lucas's men followed the drones. Lead Anna stumbled, nearly falling, but David yanked her up. Keep going, don't stop. They scrambled uphill. The slope steep and rocky. David's lungs burned, but he pushed harder. Behind them, the drone wind closing in. At the ridge's peak, David pulled Anna down flat. He motioned to Bruno, who crawled beside him, muscles tense. Below, flashlights bobbed through the trees. Voices barked orders. They were closing the net. David scanned the terrain. To their left, the ground fell into a ravine filled with jagged rocks and debris. Dangerous but also cover. To their right, the slope dropped into a dense thicket that could hide them if they made it before the men did. Anna followed his gaze, panic in her eyes. We're trapped. David shook his head. Not yet. He turned to Bruno, pressing a hand to the dog's side. Ready, boy. Bruno's tail flicked once. He was ready. David looked at Anna. When I say move, you run to the right. Don't stop. Don't look back. Bruno and I will follow. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but then she saw his eyes. Calm, focused. The eyes of a man who'd lived through worse than this. She nodded. The drone buzzed closer, its red light sweeping the ridge. Men shouted below, their boots pounding against the earth. David waited, his heart slowed. Time stretched. Now, he barked. They burst from cover, sprinting into the thicket. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through leaves and branches. Bruno barked furiously, darting left to draw fire, his body moving like a blur through the dark. Anna cried out as a branch whipped across her face, but she kept running, driven by pure adrenaline. David stayed just behind her, deflecting branches, guiding her path. The forest roared with chaos shouts, gunfire, the drone's mechanical whine, but they pushed deeper, until the sounds began to fade. Finally, they collapsed in the shadows of an old oak, hidden by roots and underbrush. Anna's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. They're never going to stop, are they? David looked back toward the chaos. His jaw was tight, his mind already calculating their next move. No, he said quietly, they won't stop until one of us is dead. Bruno leaned against him, panting, eyes fierce even in exhaustion. For the first time since it began, David felt it settle heavy in his chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war, and it had only just begun. The night was colder now, the kind of cold that seeped through skin and bones until it reached the heart. David led Anna and Bruno along a narrow deer trail until he found what he was looking for, a shallow cave cut into the side of a granite ridge. The entrance was narrow, half hidden by vines and brush, but inside it opened enough for them to take shelter. Here, David said quietly, we'll rest. Anna ducked under the vines, stumbling into the darkness. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed against the stone wall, hugging herself for warmth. Bruno padded in behind her, shaking off leaves and dirt before curling at her feet. David crouched near the entrance. He didn't like caves. They were traps if you weren't careful. But with Lucas's men combing the forest, they needed cover more than open ground. He pulled a small fire starter from his pack, a spark, a bit of dry bark, and soon a low fire flickered, filling the cave with a faint glow. Shadows danced on the stone walls. Anna stretched her hands toward the flame, her eyes wet with exhaustion. For a long moment, there was only silence, the crackle of fire, Bruno's steady breathing, the wind outside. Then Anna spoke. My father, she whispered. He did something to that man, didn't he? Lucas. David didn't answer right away. He'd spent years staying out of other people's wars. But tonight, there was no hiding. Anna's eyes filled with anger and tears. I don't know why I'm paying for his sins. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose any of it. Her voice broke. He's not even here to protect me. He's probably sitting in his house, safe, pretending everything's fine. David studied her face. She was young, but her pain wasn't. He recognized it. The look of someone betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect her. You're right, David said finally. His voice was low, steady. This isn't fair, but right now, fair doesn't matter. Surviving does. Anna stared at the fire, her hands trembling. I'm scared, David. I don't want to die out here. David leaned back against the stone wall. Fear's normal. It keeps you alive. What matters is what you do with it. For a moment, Anna's eyes lifted to his. The firelight flickered between them. Why are you here? She asked softly. Why live in the middle of nowhere with no one but a dog? David's jaw tightened. He hadn't spoken of it in years, but maybe it was the fire. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, raw and searching, that made him answer. I was a soldier, he said. Special operations. One mission went bad. We lost men, good men, and I lived. He paused, the weight of it pressing down. That's what I carry. The guilt. So I left. Easier to fight ghosts out here than people out there. Anna's expression softened. And Bruno? David looked down at the German shepherd. Bruno lifted his head at the sound of his name, his eyes steady, loyal. Bruno was part of it too, David said. He pulled me out when I was bleeding out. Saved my life. Twice, maybe 3 times, when I left the unit. They were going to retire him. I couldn't let them put him in a kennel. He's more than a dog. Bruno stretched, pressing his body against David's leg, as if confirming every word. Anna wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. You're lucky to have him, David gave the faintest of smiles. Yeah, I am. Silence filled the cave again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was softer. Anna shifted closer to the fire, her face glowing in the light. You know, for the first time since this started. I don't feel completely hopeless. David raised an eyebrow. Why is that? She looked at him, a small, tired smile, breaking through the fear. Because you didn't leave me. You could have, but you didn't. David didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was, when he found her tied to that tree, he had thought about walking away, but something stopped him, something he hadn't felt in years. Bruno yawned and laid his head on his paws. The fire crackled outside. The wind howled against the rocks, but inside the cave, for the first time all night, there was a fragile sense of peace. David leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. His body was exhausted, his mind sharp, alert. He knew Lucas wouldn't stop. He knew dawn would bring another fight. But here, in this brief pocket of warmth, he let himself breathe. Anna leaned against the stone, her eyes heavy with sleep. But before they closed, she whispered, almost to herself, maybe the world isn't as cold as I thought. David opened his eyes, looking at her, then at Bruno, always watchful, always ready. Maybe, he thought, she was right. But morning was coming, and with it, war. The fire in the cave had burned down 2 embers by dawn. David was already awake, crouched near the entrance, scanning the tree line. Years of training meant his body didn't need much sleep. His instincts did the rest. Anna stirred, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. Bruno lifted his head, ears twitching. He had heard it too, a faint, unnatural hum carried by the morning air. David cursed under his breath. Drones. Lucas wasn't wasting time. He was tightening the noose. Anna, get up. David whispered sharply. We have to move. Now. She blinked, still groggy, but the urgency in his tone cut through the fog of sleep. She pushed herself to her feet, clutching her small pack. David led them out of the cave and into the dense cover of the forest. The hum grew louder. Above the canopy, a black dot hovered, circling, slowly, not military, but advanced enough in for its sensors, long-range lensers, silent rotors, the kind of gear only money or obsession could buy. Lucas has resources, David muttered. He's not just some guy with a grudge. He's equipped like a war. Anna glanced up nervously. How do we even hide from something like that? David's eyes swept the ground. We use the earth, shade, rivers, heat breaks. Technology has weaknesses. We exploit them. He motioned for her to follow and led them toward a narrow creek that cut through the woods. The water was icy, mountain-fed, but it would mask their body heat and throw off the senses. Shoes off, David ordered. Step where I step. Anna hesitated, teeth chattering as she put one foot into the freezing stream. God, it's so cold. Better cold than dead, David said flatly. Bruno waded in beside them, his coat bristling but his focus unwavering. They moved slowly, each step careful, letting the forest swallow them. The drone buzzed overhead, scanning, but passed without pausing. David waited until the sound faded, then motioned them onto dry land. Anna collapsed onto the bank, shivering. How long do we have to keep running like this? David crouched next to her, scanning the treetops. His eyes were hard, calculating. As long as it takes. Lucas isn't just chasing you. He's hunting me too. Her eyes widened. You. David nodded. When men like him can't hit their real target, they take hostages. Your leverage, Anna, nothing more. Anna's face flushed with anger. So I'm just bait in some twisted game between him and my father. David didn't answer. The truth hurt enough without words. Bruno suddenly stiffened, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling from his chest. David froze, then he saw a glint of metal through the branches. Another drone, closer this time, dipping lower. Move, David hissed, pulling Anna to her feet. They darted into thicker brush, weaving between pines and ferns. The drone tracked them, its camera worry as it adjusted. Bruno bolted ahead, barking sharply, drawing the drone's lens toward him. The machine swiveled, chasing the movement, following the dog into a patch of thorns. "Bruno," Anna cried. David grabbed her wrist. "No. He knows what he's doing." The drone dipped after Bruno, rotors slicing the air. Then a branch whipped back, striking the drone's rotor. The machine spun wildly, crashed into the thicket, and exploded in a spray of sparks. Bruno bounded back, tail wagging, proud. His muzzle was scratched, but his eyes gleamed with victory. Anna fell to her knees, hugging him tightly. "You crazy, brave thing. You saved us." David exhaled slowly, tension leaving his shoulders. "That's one down. But Lucas has more. He'll keep pushing. He wants to break us before he closes in." Anna looked up at him, fear and frustration mixing in her voice. "How do we fight someone who can see us even when we hide? Someone with more money, more tech, more everything?" David's gaze was steady, cold. "We fight with what he doesn't have. Instinct, discipline, and each other." Anna held his eyes. For the first time, she believed him, maybe not fully, but enough to breathe a little easier. Bruno pressed against them, ears still alert, as if reminding them that they weren't alone. The forest fell quiet again, but it was a deceptive quiet, somewhere beyond the trees. Lucas was watching, adjusting his plans. The circle was closing, and the clock was ticking. David looked toward the horizon. This isn't just survival anymore. This is war. The crash of the drone had bought them time, but David knew it wouldn't last. Lucas's resources were deep, and every second they stayed put meant the enemy was adjusting, recalculating. By midday, the sun was high, filtering through the dense pines. David led Anna and Bruno along a ridgeline, moving carefully to stay under cover. Every so often he stopped, crouched low, scanned the terrain, then signaled for them to follow. Anna was exhausted. Her shoes were soaked, her muscles burned, and her throat felt like sandpaper, yet she kept going, step after step, because something in David's presence told her stopping wasn't an option. Finally, they paused in a shaded clearing. Bruno flopped down, panting heavily. David scanned the tree line again, then turned to Anna. "They're closing in," he said. "Matter of fact, Lucas doesn't back off. He'll tighten the net until we're forced into the open." Anna's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but then she caught herself. She remembered her father's world of polished boardrooms and shallow comfort, a world where she had been protected but never trusted to stand on her own. And now here she was, surrounded by dirt and danger, expected to keep up with a man who had lived war. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she crouched down, picking up a handful of pine needles. "What are you doing?" David asked. Anna rubbed the needles between her palms, releasing their sharp resinous scent. "These trees, they mask scent. They can also throw off certain senses. If Lucas's guys are using thermal or infrared, thick layers of natural oil and insulation can scatter the signal." David raised an eyebrow. "You learned that in biology class." "Environmental science," she corrected, a small spark of pride in her voice. "I thought it was useless back then. Maybe it isn't." She scanned the clearing, noting the lay of the land. "If we move toward that ravine," she pointed, "the rock walls will shield us from heat sensors. And if we cover ourselves with enough organic matter, it'll take longer for them to distinguish us from the background." David stared at her, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Not bad." Anna met his gaze a little breathless. "I don't want to just be baggage, David. I can help. I need to help." He studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "All right. From here on, you're not cargo. You're part of the team. But that means no mistakes. Lives depend on it." Anna's chest tightened, but she nodded. "Deal." They set off again, this time with Anna taking point on the route. She led them toward the ravine, showing David spots where vegetation was thickest, or where the terrain broke up their outline. Bruno seemed to sense the shift in her energy, staying close to her side, occasionally brushing his shoulder against her leg as if in silent approval. Hours passed. They stopped only briefly to drink from streams or catch their breath. David noticed that Chanjana was still scared, but now she was channeling it into something sharper, more focused. Every time she made a small suggestion like which way the wind carried sound or how shadows lengthened near dusk, she was right. As evening approached, the air grew cooler. They found shelter under a natural overhang, hidden from sight but wide enough to rest. Anna sank down against a stone wall, trembling with fatigue. "I can't believe I'm still on my feet." David sat across from her, his expression softer than usual. "Fear burns fast, purpose lasts longer. You're learning the difference." Anna gave a tired laugh. "I'm just trying not to die." David didn't smile, but his eyes warmed. "That's how it starts. For a moment, silence fell between them. Only Bruno's steady breathing filled the space. Then Anna whispered, almost to herself, "I don't want to go back to who I was. Weak, protected, helpless. I want to be someone who fights." David met her gaze. "Then keep going. You're closer than you think." Bruno nudged her hand with his nose, and she stroked his fur, feeling a small surge of strength. Above them, unseen but certain, Lucas and his men continued to move. The net was still closing. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Anna felt like she wasn't just running. She was learning how to survive, and maybe, just maybe, how to fight back.
The night air was heavy, colder than the nights before. Clouds drifted across the sky, blotting out the stars, and in the shadows of the forest the silence felt unnatural, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. David kept his back to the stone wall, rifle across his knees, eyes scanning every flicker of movement. Anna sat close to Bruno, resting her hand on his thick fur for comfort. Her body ached, but it was her mind that felt most fragile, caught between fear and a strange, growing determination. Suddenly a sharp crack split the quiet, not a branch snapping, but the distinct echo of amplified sound. David stiffened. A voice followed, cold and deliberate. "Anna Whitmore." Her blood froze. The voice came again, carried on some kind of loudspeaker rigged through the forest. Smooth, taunting, impossible to ignore. "Did David tell you the truth? Or is he keeping that from you too?" Anna's eyes darted to David. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The voice continued. "Your father isn't the man you think he is. He's not some respected businessman. He's a thief, a liar, man who built his empire by bleeding others dry, including me." Anna's chest tightened, anger flaring. "He's lying," she whispered, almost to herself. But Lucas's words didn't stop. "Contracts sabotaged, partners ruined, debts buried with lawyers and bribes. I lost everything because of your father, and you." His tone sharpened, almost venomous. "You're the key to breaking him, the perfect leverage." David cursed under his breath. He knew this tactic. Psychological warfare. Lucas wasn't just chasing them, he was digging into their minds, shaking their foundation. Anna stood abruptly, her hands trembling. "David, is it true? Did my father really?" David looked at her, the conflict clear in his eyes. He could lie, shield her, but lies were exactly what Lucas was counting on. "Yes," David said finally, his voice low but steady. "Your father's hands aren't clean. I don't know every detail, but I know enough. He's done things, bad things, to stay on top." Anna felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Betrayal rushed in like icy water. All her life she'd lived under the shadow of her father's power, believing it was earned, justified. And now she was hearing it might have been built on ruin. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. "So I'm nothing more than his daughter, a bargaining chip." David stepped closer, his tone firm. "No, you're more than his mistakes. Whatever your father did, that's his weight to carry, not yours." Anna shook her head. "You don't understand. Everything I am, everything I've had, it's all because of him. If Lucas is right, then I've been living a lie." Bruno pressed against her leg. Sensing her turmoil, she dropped to her knees, burying her face in his fur. David crouched down beside her. "Listen to me. You can't let Lucas define who you are. He wants you broken, doubting, easy to control. Don't give him that." Anna lifted her head, eyes red but fierce. "Then who am I, David? If not his daughter, then who?" For a moment, David didn't answer. He just held her gaze, seeing the fracture but also the strength forming beneath it. "You're Anna," he said finally, "the woman who just guided us through miles of wilderness, the woman who refused to quit even when she was terrified. That's who you are, and that's enough." Silence hung heavy. Then, as if on cue, the forest lit up with sudden flares. Red and white light burst through the trees, flooding the ravine. With a harsh glow, David snapped his rifle up. "They've found us." Figures moved in the tree line, shadows with weapons, their approach coordinated and precise. Lucas wasn't just talking anymore, he was closing the trap. Anna's breath caught in her throat. The moment of weakness was gone, replaced by raw urgency. She looked at David, at Bruno, and then at the advancing lights. This was no longer about her father's sins, it was about survival. David's voice was low but sharp. "Stay behind me, stay quiet, and remember you're not baggage. You're part of this fight now." Anna nodded, her fear hardening into something sharper. The past that had been uncovered, and now it was trying to kill them.
The forest exploded with light. Flares hissed overhead, turning the night into a harsh red glow. Shadows stretched across the ground, and the smell of burning chemicals clung to the air. David pressed Anna against the rock wall and signaled for silence. Bruno crouched low beside them, his body tense, eyes locked on the tree line. Footsteps, many of them, heavy, methodical. The hunters had become the hunted. David scanned quickly. 4 figures closing in from the east, another 2 circling to the west, classic pincer maneuver. Lucas wasn't just trying to flush them out, he was tightening the noose. "Stay low," David whispered to Anna. Don't move until I tell you. Her face was pale, but her jaw set. She nodded. Bruno gave a low growl, so deep it vibrated through the stone. The first figure broke from the tree line, weapon raised. David moved like a shadow, silent, precise. He slipped behind the attacker, one hand clamping over the man's mouth, the other driving a knife into his side. The body crumpled soundlessly into the brush. Anna's breath hitched, but she didn't scream. She just held tighter to the rock. The second figure appeared almost immediately. This one was faster, sharper. He spotted David, raised his rifle only to be met by a blur of fur and teeth. Bruno launched himself, jaws snapping around the man's arm. The rifle fired wildly, bullets tearing bark from trees, but Bruno's weight drove the man to the ground. David was there in a heartbeat, finishing it cleanly. He yanks Bruno back, whispering, "Good boy, stay close." But the noise had given them away. From the tree line came shouted commands, and suddenly the air lit up with gunfire. Bullets chewed through branches, sparks flying. David dragged Anna deeper into the ravine, returning fire in short, controlled bursts. Every shot was measured, precise. Years of training boiled into instinct. Anna stumbled, ducking low. "David, we can't to outrun them." "We don't outrun," he said, reloading. "We fight smart." He pointed to a cluster of fallen logs. "Get there. Stay down. Use the rocks for cover." Anna hesitated only a second before crawling fast, Bruno shielding her as if he understood the command. David moved the other way, drawing attention. Gunfire followed him, sparks flaring as bullets struck stone. He dove behind a boulder, waited, then popped up to return fire. One of Lucas's men dropped, another scrambled for cover. Minutes felt like hours. The forest was chaos, shouts, gunfire, the howl of Bruno as he launched himself again and again. But still, the enemy pressed in. Then Anna did something unexpected. From her cover, she grabbed a fist-sized rock, waited for one of the men to advance, and hurled it with all her strength. It cracked against his helmet, stunning him just long enough for David to finish the job. Her chest heaved, adrenaline flooding her. She looked at David wide-eyed, half in shock at what she had just done. David gave the smallest nod of approval. "Good, keep that edge." But their advantage was slipping. Ammunition was low. Bruno was bleeding from a graze along his flank, though he refused to slow down, and still more shadows moved in the distance. Suddenly a deep voice cut through the gunfire. "David, Lucas." He stepped into the open, his face lit by the dying flare light, gun in hand. Calm in the chaos, his men shifted formation, covering his flanks. "This ends tonight," he shouted. "You can't win. Hand her over and maybe I'll let you walk away." David's grip tightened on his rifle. Anna pressed herself against the rocks, her heart hammering, every nerve screaming at her to run, but she held her ground. Bruno bared his teeth, a low growl rumbling like distant thunder. The night was burning, the forest itself seemed to pulse with violence, and David knew this was only the beginning of the final showdown.
The gunfire slowed. The forest that had been alive with chaos only moments ago fell into a chilling stillness. Smoke hung in the air, acrid and heavy. The last flare fizzled out above the tree line, leaving only the moon's pale light cutting through drifting clouds. David crouched, low rifle in hand, scanning. Bruno panted beside him, wounded but unwilling to stop. Then he heard it, the sharp intake of breath, a muffled cry. David spun around just in time to see Lucas emerge from the shadows. His arm was locked around Anna's throat, a pistol pressed hard against her temple. Her hands clawed at his grip, eyes wide with terror. "Drop it," Lucas barked. Voice steady, cold. David froze. Every instinct screamed to move, to fire. But Anna's life dangled in the balance. He slowly raised his rifle, then let it drop to the dirt. The sound of metal hitting earth echoed far too loud in the silence. Lucas smirked. "That's better." The great David Cole, special operations legend, brought to his knees by a girl. Anna's chest heaved. Tears streaked her face, but her eyes met David's, pleading silently. "Don't give up," Bruno growled, low and dangerous. Taking a step forward, "Call him off," Lucas snapped, jamming the pistol tighter against Anna's head. David lifted a hand. "Easy, boy, not yet." Bruno halted, muscles trembling, but his eyes never left Lucas. Lucas laughed, the sound cruel. "You know what your problem is, David. You still believe you can save people, but everyone you touch ends up broken. Your team, your mission, now her." He shook Anna violently, making her cry out. "You couldn't save your brothers in arms, and you won't save her." The words hit like bullets. David's jaw clenched, but his eyes stayed locked on Anna. He forced himself to push the guilt aside, to focus only on the moment. "What do you want, Lucas?" David's voice was steady, but each word carried the weight of controlled rage. Lucas sneered. Justice. Payback. Your death for starters, but not quick. No, I want you to feel it. To watch her bleed because of who her father is, because of who you are. Anna whimpered, fear flooding her. But somewhere inside, a spark of defiance remained. She remembered David's words. You're not baggaged. You're part of this fight. She twisted slightly, enough to loosen Lucas's grip for a fraction of a second. It wasn't much, but David saw it. His pulse quickened. Every fiber of his being screamed to act. But one wrong move meant Anna's death. Bruno sensed it too. His body was coiled like a spring, eyes burning, waiting for David's signal. David shifted his stance, deliberately slow, drawing Lucas's attention. If it's me you want, then take me. Let her go. Lucas's eyes narrowed. Noble, predictable, but no, you die watching. The gun pressed harder against Anna's head. She squeezed her eyes shut, a tear rolling down her cheek. David's heart pounded. He had seconds, maybe less. He caught Anna's gaze, just for a moment. A silent message passed between them. Hold on. Then David gave the faintest sick flicker of his hand. Bruno launched forward like a thunderbolt. The forest erupted again.
Bruno hit Lucas like a freight train. The German shepherd's teeth sank into Lucas's arm, forcing the gun to fire wildly into the night. The shot cracked the air, but it missed Anna by inches. She dropped to the ground, rolling free as Bruno tore at Lucas with unrelenting fury. David moved instantly. His hands found his pistol on instinct, lifting it in a smooth motion. But Lucas, even with Bruno latched onto him, twisted with desperate strength. The barrel of his gun swung toward David. David, no! Anna screamed. The two men fired almost simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lit up the trees. David felt the heat of a bullet grazing past his shoulder. He ignored it. His focus was absolute. His shot clipped Lucas in the side, spinning him, but not dropping him. Bruno hung on, teeth buried, refusing to let go. Lucas roared in pain, slamming his elbow into Bruno again and again. The dog whimpered but did not release. Blood stained his fur, but he only bit harder. David charged forward, closing the distance, tackling Lucas hard to the ground. The two men hit the dirt, fists flying. Bruno staggered back, sides heaving, but his eyes never left the fight. The struggle was brutal. Roar, years of rage fueled Lucas's every strike. But David fought with something deeper, with purpose. Every punch was for the friends he lost, for the girl whose life was on the line, for the part of himself he thought was gone. Lucas grabbed a rock and swung it toward David's head. David barely ducked, the blow grazing his temple. His vision blurred, but he caught Lucas's wrist and twisted, snapping the bone with a sickening crack. Lucas howled. Still, he fought. Desperation made him savage. He kicked David off, scrambled for his gun lying in the dirt. David, Anna's voice was hoarse, desperate. David's eyes darted to Bruno. The shepherd was swaying on his paws, blood dripping. But when he saw Lucas reach for the weapon, he didn't hesitate. Bruno lunged. He collided with Lucas before the gun could be raised, driving him to the ground again. Teeth locked onto Lucas's throat. This time, the sound was primal. Lucas's scream cut short, gurgling into silence. His body went limp beneath Bruno's weight. The forest fell quiet. David pushed himself up, chest heaving. His eyes landed on Bruno. The shepherd released Lucas, staggered back, and collapsed into the dirt. No, 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 David whispered, rushing to his side. He dropped his pistol, hands moving to the wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. Anna crawled closer, tears streaming. Is he? David shook his head fiercely. Stay with me. Boy, you hear me. Stay. His voice broke, raw with a kind of pain he hadn't felt in years. Bruno's eyes fluttered open, locking with David's. For a moment, there was no war, no past, no guilt, just a man and his dog. Bruno's tail thumped weakly against the ground. Once, twice, then it stilled. David bowed his head, pressing his forehead against Bruno's, silent tears cutting through the dirt and blood on his face. Anna's hand touched his shoulder, trembling. He saved us. David's voice was barely a whisper. He always did. For the first time in a long time, David let the grief come. He didn't fight it. He let it crash over him. But within that pain was something else, something Bruno had given him. The strength to keep going. The reminder that love, loyalty, and sacrifice were not weaknesses. They were the reason to fight. The night air was cold, the forest still. Lucas lay dead, his hatred silenced, but the cost was heavy. David rose slowly, lifting Bruno into his arms. He carried him through the clearing, each step heavy but steady. Anna walked beside him, silent, her hand brushing against his. and for the first time, David didn't pull away. The night dragged on forever. David carried Bruno's body back to the small cabin where it had all begun. Each step felt heavier than the last. Anna followed close, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes swollen from crying. Inside, the cabin was silent. The flicker of the lantern cast long shadows across the wooden walls. David laid Bruno gently on the floor, as if the dog were only sleeping. His hands lingered on the thick fur, unwilling to let go. Anna knelt beside him. "David, I'm so sorry." He didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the shepherd's still form. His voice finally broke the silence, low and rough. "He gave everything. He didn't hesitate. Not once." Anna wiped her face, voice trembling. "He saved me. He saved you. He saved both of us." David nodded, but the guilt rose in his chest like a tide. I should have kept him safe. That was my job." Anna shook her head firmly. "No, that's not true. Bruno wasn't just protecting you. He made his choice, because he loved you, because you were his world." Her words cut deep, but not in the way David expected. For years, he had lived buried in guilt over his team, over that mission, over everything he had lost. But looking at Anna, hearing the quiet strength in her voice, he realized something. Bruno hadn't died because of his failures. He had died because loyalty ran deeper than fear. Anna's hand rested gently on his. "Don't dishonor him by carrying the same guilt you've carried on these years. Honor him by living, by not hiding anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. It was the silence of two people breathing the same truth, the same pain. Then, faintly, in the distance, sirens, blue and red lights began to flicker against the trees outside. Anna looked toward the sound. "The police, they're here." David didn't move right away. He stayed by Bruno's side until the knock came at the door. When the officers entered, weapons drawn, Anna quickly explained everything. Lucas, the men, the kidnapping, the fight. David stood silent, his eyes distant. As they placed handcuffs on the surviving members of Lucas's crew dragged from the woods, one officer paused, his eyes falling on Bruno's body. Respect softened his face. He lowered his head slightly before stepping back outside. Anna turned to David. "It's over. They're gone." But David knew better. It wasn't over, not completely. The fight in the forest was finished. But the battle inside him, the one he had been running from for years, was only now beginning to shift. As dawn broke, the first rays of light spilled into the cabin. David and Anna stood together at the door, looking out at the forest. Anna leaned her head gently against his arm. "He gave us a chance, David. Let's not waste it." David exhaled, slowly, the pain in his chest still raw, but beneath it, something new began to stir. Hope. Bruno was gone, but his sacrifice had given David more than survival. It had given him the courage to start again. And standing there with Anna, with the forest quiet around them and the sunrise painting the horizon, David felt something he hadn't in years, the possibility of healing. The town felt different after the forest, the noise, the lights, the polished buildings. It all seemed distant compared to the roar silence of the woods. For David, stepping back into civilization was like walking into a world that no longer fit. Anna stayed close as they entered the small police station. Her father was already there, Richard Hartman, a man in his late 50s, well-dressed, polished, the kind of man used to boardrooms and deals. When he saw Anna, relief swept across his face. "Anna." He rushed forward, pulling her into a tight embrace. His voice cracked. "Thank God you're safe." Anna stiffened for a moment before hugging him back. But David noticed her eyes uncertain, distant. Richard turned to David. "And you must be the man who saved her." He extended a hand, formal and controlled. "David, is it?" David shook it, but without warmth. He wasn't here for thanks. He just wanted to leave. But Anna didn't let go of his arm. She stayed by his side, as if her place was there, not in the polished office with her father. Later, when the police finished their statements, Richard pulled Anna aside. "Come home, sweetheart. You've been through enough. You don't belong out there in the wild with him." Anna's jaw tightened. She looked at David, then back at her father. "You don't get it, Dad. Out there, I found more truth in a few nights than I ever did in years of luxury." Richard frowned. "That man lives like a ghost. You have a future college family, a safe life. Don't throw it away for free." Glanced at David. "For someone broken." The words cut deep, but David stayed silent. He had no defense. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe he was broken. But Anna stepped forward, her voice steady. "He's not broken. He's real. He faced death for me. He fought for me. And when I was terrified, he didn't just save my life, he gave me courage. That's more than you ever gave me." The room went quiet. Richard's face fell, wounded by her words. Anna turned back to David, her eyes softened. I don't want to go back to that life. I don't want to sit in a house full of money and lies. I want— She hesitated, then said it clearly. I want to be with you. David's chest tightened. Anna, you don't know what that means. My life isn't easy. It's quiet. It's lonely. If she cut him off, then it won't be lonely anymore, because I'll be there. Richard tried once more. Anna, please, think about your future. She shook her head. I already have. My future is my choice. For the first time in years, David didn't feel like running. He saw the determination in Anna's eyes, the same fire that had helped him survive in the woods, and something inside him shifted. He nodded slowly. If this is what you want, then stay. Anna smiled through tears, stepping closer to him. It's what I want. Richard stood frozen, unable to change her mind. He looked at his daughter one last time, then quietly walked out, leaving the two of them standing together in the stillness of the station. Anna slipped her hand into David's. Let's go home. And for the first time, David didn't think of the cabin as just a place to hide. With Anna by his side, it might finally become something else. Home. The mountains were quiet again. No shouts, no gunfire, no running through the dark. Just the sound of pine trees swaying and a river rolling in the distance. David stood on the porch of his cabin, a mug of coffee in his hand. The air was crisp, cool enough to bite at his skin. But he didn't mind, for the first time in years. His mind wasn't filled with ghosts. Inside, Bruno shifted on a blanket near the fire. The bandages were gone now, replaced by a faint scar along his side. He was slower than before, but his eyes were just as sharp. When David glanced back through the open door, Bruno lifted his head, ears twitching, as if checking to make sure his friend was still there. Good boy, David said softly. You earned your rest. Footsteps creaked across the floorboards. Anna stepped out, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Her hair caught the first light of morning, messy but beautiful. She leaned against the post beside him. Coffee? She asked. He handed her the mug. She took a sip and smiled. Still too bitter, still keeps you alive, David replied. For a moment, they just stood there, listening to the forest breathe. Anna broke the silence. You ever think it would end like this? David shook his head. I didn't think it would end at all. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life waiting for the past to catch up, hiding. And now? She asked. He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were steady, her voice calm, but he could see the fire underneath. The same fire that had carried her through fear, through pain, through betrayal. Now, David said, I think I can stop hiding. Anna leaned her head on his shoulder. Good, because I'm not planning on going anywhere. Inside, Bruno let out a soft bark. As if to agree, Anna laughed, the sound cutting through the still morning like sunlight breaking clouds. They went back inside together. The cabin no longer felt like a shelter for one broken man and his dog. With Anna moving around, setting down books, humming while she cooks, it felt like a home. Later that day, David sat at the table with a notebook. Pages filled with rough sketches and lists, repairs for the roof, a small garden plot near the stream, even plans for a second room. He wasn't planning for survival anymore. He was planning for life. Anna came over, resting a hand on his shoulder. What's that? Just ideas, David said. She looked down at the paper and smiled. Looks like a future. He didn't answer right away. He just nodded, feeling something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Outside, the sun climbed higher, pushing away the last of the morning fog. The world was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was waiting. Bruno stretched near the fire. Anna's hand rested lightly on his fan. For the first time, David believed in the word he had almost forgotten. Home. And with the dawn breaking over the mountains, he knew it wasn't just an ending, it was the start of something new.